Today you need to get into Canvas. If you'll go down to today's date, I'd appreciate it. Kind of similar to what we did on Tuesday, we're going to go over all things DBQ. We'll start by going over the DBQ rubric one last time, just kind of clarify any questions that maybe you have about it. Once that's done, we're going to look at a sample of DBQ. It's actually one that you guys wrote a while back, the one over communism and its impact on feminist movements around the world. We'll look over that just real briefly. I'm not going to make you like read the documents over again because at some point in time you already did that, but we're going to just kind of breeze through it real quick. Then we're going to use this DBQ dissection PowerPoint. I'm basically going to break down different ways you could have approached it. Some of it's stuff that I wrote, like the introduction I'm going to show you, I wrote up because I felt like it. But the rest of it is actually from other students. Not this year. This was a year or two ago that I made this. But students that have sat in this class and took the AP test, and this is kind of what they wrote. We're going to go over how to get the points for outside evidence, how to use your documents, how to source your documents, the CAT process, which is something that a lot of people just outright skip. But I'm telling you, it is not that bad. Then, if time permits, we're going to watch this Heimler's history video. He threw about 13 minutes, so we'll see if it works. We'll see if we have enough time to watch it. But he basically breaks out a DBQ. It's also one that you guys wrote before, the one with the railroads and imperialism. And he kind of shows you how he would start planning the DBQ, how he would organize it. He does reference some files. I do have those available beneath. So if you want to look over those as we watch the video, you certainly can. And hopefully between my kind of explanation of how I would do it and his explanation of how he would do it, hopefully that brings a little bit of clarity to the whole DBQ process. Again, on the AP exam, the DBQ is 25% of your grade. Believe it or not, even though it's time consuming, it is the easiest of all the writing you're going to do. So that is the game plan for the day. Again, this is kind of the last big review day, the last big part of the test we're going to be talking about. Your AP exam, of course, is coming up real soon, this Monday, 8 a.m. You need to be down by the gym by 7:15. Because at 7:30, we're planning on having you guys checked in your seats. They're going to start reading instructions. And then the exam itself will start at 8. So it's really important you're here on time. If you were late, probably not going to test. For those of you that are not taking the AP test today, use to do whatever you need to do. We did have an assignment due yesterday when I was out giving AP test, the LEQ kind of introduction assignment quiz. You had to choose 2 different writing prompts and basically produce a paragraph over each, context, thesis. Again, I'm looking for effort. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect. If you're taking the AP exam, really kind of act like you're going to write this thing because, again, you're going to need to do that in the near future. If you're not, again, just show me some effort. At this point, it is past due, but if you can get it at some point today, it's only 20 points off. And this is a pretty easy assignment to end up getting a bunch of points taken off for it being late. So get that stuff in. If you're not taking the AP test and you didn't turn it in yesterday, that should be your priority. Other things, what else do we got going on? I think that's pretty much it. Do want to remind you, for those of you taking the AP test, Mr. Heimler, starting tomorrow, is going to do some content review. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, starting, I believe, at 7 p.m. on his YouTube channel. He is going to have a live streaming review session. Again, some of you guys really do need to kind of acquaint yourself with the content. I think looking through the curriculum guide and using the Thibault site and using your notebooks and your textbook and resources online like Heimler or even the College Board content review. These are the sort of things that I think that will really help you get ready for the AP test on Monday. So, like I said, if you will open up your laptops, if you'll get on Canvas, I think it'll be very helpful if you can follow along. Now, the first thing that we're going to look at, and it's actually not under today's date. It is from, Tuesday. We're going to look at this AP History rubrics one final time. After today, I don't plan on breaking it out ever again, so just kind of bear with me. You can open it up if you want, or if you can see well enough from where you are, just kind of follow along with me. DBQ is very similar in structure to the LEQ, at least as far as the rubric is concerned. Biggest difference is obviously you have documents to contend with, but also instead of 6 possible points, you have 7. Again, the DBQ is more valuable than the LEQ on the AP exam. So you really want to focus on this first. You want to devote most of your allotted time, I think it's an hour and 40 minutes, to really working on this. The beginning is the same. First paragraph or so, establish your context. Introduce the time period, introduce the topic, give some specific detailed information. Kind of set up the reader, which, someone somewhere, for kind of what's your overall time period and topic, the sort of things that lead to that, even being something worth writing about. Then you close out with your thesis statement. Your thesis statement on the DBQ. Unlike the LEQ, where you got to kind of come up with it off the top of your head, with the DBQ, you're not going to have a thesis statement until after you read those documents. Again, you want to take what the documents give you. You're using the documents to prove some point, to form an argument. So essentially what you're going to do is you're going to read the documents, and then in your thesis, you're going to tell kind of some of your observations from the documents. Like the one we're going to look at here in a minute, communism and its effect on feminist movements. The sort of things you're seeing in the document that should form what you put in your thesis. I know that's kind of vague, but I'm going to show you a sample here in a second. I think it's going to make a lot more sense. So yeah, 2 points right there, possibly in the first paragraph. Again, I wouldn't write a conclusion for any of your essays, but I would maybe close out the essay with a restatement of your thesis, because I'm telling you, more often than not, you'll come up with your thesis. But then as you're writing the rest of the essay, you'll be like, man, I got a way better place, way better way of saying it. So restate it, rephrase it a little bit. You never know. Maybe that first statement wasn't quite enough to get the point, but after you write the essay, your restatement might be enough. I see that all the time. More often than not, the second thesis, the restated thesis, is the one that's usually the more quality thesis statement. From there, you get your evidence points. And the bulk of this comes from just using your documents. You get 1 point for using the content of at least 3 documents to address the topic of the prompt. Guys, that's pretty much just summarizing 3 of the documents and tying it together with your argument. That's all it is. Okay, you could literally be like, document 1, document 2, document 3, says this, says this, says this. You're probably going to get the point. Now, a couple things to remember. First, do not quote the documents. The reader has already read them. They don't feel like reading it again with quotation marks. That gets you absolutely nothing. That's not using the document. Summarize it. Put it in your own words. Doesn't have to be a lot, a sentence or two could do it. But summarize it, put it in your own words, and frame it in such a way that it agrees with whatever your argument is. If you want to go for the 2 points in this category, you have to use at least 6 of the documents. And you've got to be very purposeful in how you use them. They do need to really, really connect to what your driving argument is. Now, here's the deal. A lot of people get freaked out. How am I going to use all 6 of these documents? I mean, there's 7. There's 1 you can leave off. You can use all 7, but you only have to use 6. Guys, if you're running out of time and all those documents just perplex you, just use 3, okay? You could get the majority of your points just using 3 documents, and you could craft a really solid essay out of that. Again, read through all the documents, pick the 3 that make the sense to you, the ones that you could write the most about, the ones that you could craft an argument about. That is perfectly fine. You won't get a perfect score, but you could still possibly get 6 out of 7 points just off of using 3 documents. So strategize, okay? If you're running out of time, if it takes you longer to plan than you think is necessary, or you're just running short or you're stressed or whatever, again, every section is not going to be perfect on this. You want to accumulate as many points as you can as you move. Next thing I want to mention, as you use the documents, label them. In document 1, document 2 says, document 3 asserts, And the reason I say that, it's kind of like what I was talking about yesterday with the SAQs. DBQs, you're going to have the same person grading like 700 of these. And after a while, they kind of lose their mind. It all runs together. Maybe that's just me, but from my understanding, based on the people I've talked to, yeah, it gets very tedious after a while. When you label the documents, you are putting flashing lights around. Hey, I'm using this document now. If you just kind of randomly talk about some stuff that's kind of in the document, but you never label which one, that stuff sometimes can kind of get forgotten about. Again, we're trying to grade these. We're trying to grade them fast. We're scanning through them more than reading every single word. So you want flashing lights around everything that you're doing that's going to earn you points. I've seen people actually label it context, thesis. You can do that. You don't have to. That's maybe taking it too far. But with the documents, man, put, hey, in document 1, in document 2. That way we very quickly know what you're talking about. We can look back at the documents very quickly and kind of see if what you're saying jives with what is actually there. Again, highly recommend it. Your next point comes from evidence outside the documents. Guys, this is just like what you do for your LEQ or just like what you do for your SAQ. It's you bringing up specific details, people, places, terms, names, events, developments, inventions, whatever. Okay, name it, put a little bit of explanation there, and boom, you get your point. The thing here is it's got to be something that's not specifically mentioned in the documents. Okay, this essay we're going to look at, it's all about communism and feminist movements. You could bring up almost anything in either of those spheres, and if it's specific enough, that's how you get your evidence, as long as it's not explicitly in the documents themselves. Again, very similar to what you would do to answer an SAQ or an LEQ. Okay, it's just evidence that's not already there. Your last category is analysis and reasoning. Okay, the last point, that's the complex historical understanding. We'll get to that here in a second. That's a hard one, okay, but this one is not hard. For at least 3 documents, explain how or why the document's point of view, purpose, historical situation, and or audience is relevant to the argument. This is the CAP process. This is the sourcing. You only have to do it for 3 of the documents. I would try to do it for 4, maybe 5, just to kind of hedge your bets. But guys, all you're doing here, you're looking at the context, the background of that document. You know, maybe you look at the source and you see the years and you see the civilization. You're like, hey, I know a little bit about that. The Vietnam War was going on. Okay, that's context. Maybe you look at the audience. Who, in your opinion, and it is your opinion, is this intended for? Okay, I think we said at the beginning of the year, you talk about a fight here at school, you text your mom, you text your buddy. Those are 2 different texts in all likelihood. That's all it is. You're going to gear certain things for your intended audience. So you need to speculate on how that may shape what's in the document. Maybe they include certain things, maybe they don't. We have no way of knowing if this is true or not. This is just you getting creative and thinking a little bit more deeply about why the document says what it says. Purpose. Why was this written? Why was this created? You know, everybody's got agenda. Maybe it's a piece of propaganda designed to influence people. Go into that a little bit. Maybe, you know, you've got the ruler, maybe you've got a soldier, maybe you got a general, maybe you got a slave, maybe you got a refugee, you name it. We all look at the world differently, and who we are kind of shapes how we see things. So look at that source. Hey, this guy's a Russian soldier, okay, and he's a part of the government. So maybe what he's saying isn't quite true. Maybe he's trying to make their government look better than it is. Boom, you just did it. It's not that hard. Okay, attempt it, try it. Now, a couple tips. First, don't be vague about it. Much like I said, label the docs, you know, the point of view of this document is, the context is, the purpose is, the audience is. That way there are flashing lights around what you're trying to do. Again, after you read 300-400 of these things, it all blends together. So you want everything that you're doing to be crystal clear. Again, a lot of people don't even attempt this. But it's basically you just using your imagination. You know, that's all it is. What you're going to put there, there's really no way to verify. As long as you are compelling in your argument, you're fine. Last point, the unicorn, yet again. And it's all about the complex understanding. Now, they give you some bullet points explaining nuance of an issue by analyzing multiple variables. explaining both similarity and difference, or explaining both continuity and change, or explaining multiple causes, or both explaining cause and effect, explaining relevant and insightful connections within and across periods, confirming the validity of an argument by corroborating multiple perspectives across themes, qualifying or modifying an argument by considering diverse or alternative views or evidence. This understanding must be part of the argument, not merely a phrase or a reference. Now, some kids think you just do one of these things, you automatically get it. You don't. Okay, they're just kind of pointing you in the right direction in the most vague way possible, because that's some very vague language. Again, complex understanding. Do more than is necessary. You know, go above and beyond. Put as much outside evidence as you can. Show that you truly understand this material. You got a shot at that. It's difficult to get. That's why we call it the unicorn point. It's not impossible. It is something always worth trying for at the very least. So to kind of apply this, let's look at a DBQ that we've done before. If you want to follow along with me, let's go to this one, sample DBQ communism. And it looks something like this. Now, this is the last DBQ essay that we wrote. Okay, evaluate the extent to which communist movements affected women's struggle for rights in the 20th century. You got your 7 documents. We're not going to read over each one because, again, that would be way too time consuming. But a little bit later on, you know, if you're still confused, go back over this, read over the documents, then go to the resource I'm about to show you, this PowerPoint where I kind of break it apart. I think it'll make a little bit more sense. So evaluate the extent to which communist movements affected, I think that's what it says, women's struggle for equal rights. Yeah, in the 20th century. Here's the deal. I may read it and say, man, the communists were all about women's rights. They were helping them left and right. You may read it and say, man, the communists were evil. They were oppressing women. It's okay. As long as you can explain the documents in a way that it supports your argument, doesn't really matter what your argument is. Okay, you're not really writing about what you believe. You're writing what the documents tell you. Okay, because this is all about using these documents as evidence. That's all it is. The documents are there as evidence for you to kind of use to craft an argument. So you're not going to know what direction you're going until after you actually read the documents. Me, I like to read through the documents once, kind of write just some notes off to the side of exactly what's going on in that document, how is the communist movement affecting the struggle for women's rights. And then at the end, I collect all those little notes. I try to condense it down, group some documents together if I can, and that's my thesis statement. Okay, that's how you do it. And once you have your thesis statement, the rest of the essay writes itself. Okay, that's when you start, you know, talking about documents in your body paragraphs that have similarities, that go along and help prove your thesis is correct. And if you obviously have some outside evidence, you know something about a person or a place or something connected to this that is not in the documents, man, interject it while you're talking about the document. Then, hey, you know, maybe after you're done kind of summarizing the document, maybe then you start asking questions. Hey, this person's point of view. Hey, look, hey, Alexandra Kollontai, she works for the Bolshevik government. She's got an agenda. Do I know that? No, but I could speculate. And that's what this is all about. So with that in mind, evaluate the extent to which communist movements affected women's struggle for rights in the 20th century. We're going to break this down. And I made this a couple years ago. And basically, you know, we had a mock exam, similar to the mock exams that we did here over the last couple of weeks. And this essay was one of the topics. We didn't do this in class for a grade. We did it on a mock exam. And I went through it and I graded the mock exams, and afterwards I found some stuff that I was like, man, this is pretty good, you know? So I started doing some screenshots. I put some stuff together. I'm going to show you some kids a couple years ago, I think it's the seniors that are graduating this year, some of the things that they did with it, okay? And hopefully when you see, you know, people getting these points for real, it'll make a little bit more sense. Now, the rubric was a little bit different back then. I don't believe context was actually a point category, so I had to write my own introduction to give you that. But this is what I did. So I read through the DBQ. I made my little notes. I did what I just told you I did. And this is kind of what I came up with. Is this really my opinion in real life? I don't know. I don't think so. But the documents led me to this conclusion. That's what it's all about. You're writing an essay based on what the documents say, not so much what you think yourselves. So I've got my context, I got my thesis, let's go over it. So again, this is for the prompt we just looked at, analyze the degree to which communist movements affected women's struggle for rights in the 20th century. Context in red. Despite most countries granting women suffrage by the 1920s, women continued to struggle to attain social and political equality through the 20th century. Meanwhile, the rise in the popularity of communist ideologies advocated economic equality for the good of all people as a response to global capitalism. Nations such as the Soviet Union, China, Cuba, and Vietnam all instituted communist governments, and in the process affected the struggle for women's rights greatly. So I've kind of talked a little bit about the time period, early 20th century. I've talked about, how communism is rising, why it's rising. I mean, that's context, that's background information. Okay, I didn't tell everything that ever happened in the 20th century. I didn't tell everything that ever happened with communism. There's many directions you could go, but again, you're just providing a little bit of background information, what kind of leads to your topic, what's going on in the time period that you're writing about. Now, my thesis comes from my documents. And I read through all the documents, and I saw, a lot of them had similarities. You got to kind of look for it. But for me, a lot of the documents were all about exposing the problems of patriarchy. Like, even in some of the documents, they acknowledge, hey, it's not perfect. Men still hold all the power and women are still struggling. But at least they're exposing these problems, which maybe, you didn't see in every other government. So I decided, documents 1, 2, and 6, pretty similar. I'm going to call that exposing the problems of patriarchy. Okay, group 2, protecting and providing opportunities for women. I mean, there's women working in government, there's women that are prominent authors, there's women who are like scientists, and you could speculate that maybe that was to a greater degree than you would see in a country like the United States at the time. So for me, I kind of saw those, I lumped them together, documents 3, 4, and 5. You do not have to group your documents, but I'm telling you, they put these documents together for a reason. They didn't just pick random stuff. They picked stuff that you could group together. Okay, 2, 3, maybe 4 groups, who really knows? Not mandatory, but if you can do this, it's going to make your essay run a lot more smoothly. It's going to make it easier because then you have more of a sense of direction. You will notice when you read your documents on the AP test, a couple of them pretty much are doing the same thing. That's when you kind of group them together. Okay, if you can't figure out the grouping, it is not wrong in your thesis to say, well, it did this and this and this and this and this, and basically list out those little notes that you made for each document. You can do that, but that's kind of clunky. If you can find a way to group them together, I think organizationally, stylistically, it's a little bit better. So based on what the documents told me, this is what I went with. Do I really believe this? I don't know. But the documents led me to see that there's evidence that supports this. The impact of communism on the rights of women was mainly positive, as communist regimes often acknowledged the flaws of gender inequality and put in place guaranteed protections and equal opportunities for women. And now I've kind of set it up to where I can knock this out in maybe 2 body paragraphs. Maybe the first paragraph, and it's probably going to be a long paragraph, but maybe the first paragraph, I kind of summarize all the documents that dealt with exposing the problems of patriarchy. Found a way to maybe cap a few of those. Maybe the second, maybe 3 paragraphs. That may work better. But the second paragraph, let's say, I lump all these documents together. Again, you need to briefly address each one. You can't just say 3, 4, and 5. They all had to do with protecting and providing opportunities for women. You need to go a little bit more in detail than that, but again, a sentence or 2 for each is fine. You need to demonstrate that you understand what the document says and you understand, how that relates to your thesis, to your argument, how it supports your argument. Again, you take what the documents give you. So here are some sample thesis statements, and you'll notice they don't necessarily agree with mine. I think this first one says communism was terrible to women, but that's okay. Based on their interpretation of the documents, that's fine. as long as they could use those documents in some way, shape, or form to kind of inform their opinion, inform their thesis. While communist countries often claimed within their governing laws and bodies that women enjoyed equal rights to men, accounts of women's situations prove that equality existed only on the surface, in words, and were never wholly established. Despite all their contributions and capabilities, women were still greatly discriminated against during the 20th century under communist rule. That is like the opposite of what I said. But in this person's interpretation, they looked at the documents and they said, you know what? Yeah, they're saying things are equal, but there's some things there that imply it's not. You can do that. You can approach this from multiple different perspectives. It's your opinion based on what the documents told you, based on your interpretation of the documents. Here's another thesis statement. Again, a little bit different from the first. They saw some different things. The rise of communism impacted the lives of many, and we can still see evidence of that today. This is a really long thesis. It can be more than one sentence, guys. It just has to be all together at the front or at the end. Women and their rule in communism was affected greatly by the practices of this type of government. The firm control of communism led to a rise in the role of women activists and positions of women in the work field. Women also were promoted to be unconventional for this time periods, by using childbirth and asserting themselves. Additionally, in later documents, there's evidence of problems in the household and continued discrimination of women in communist governments. So they kind of do a little bit of the good, a little bit of the bad. That's okay. Here we've got a document being used. It's document 2, and here's a good example of CAP. Somebody that looked at the point of view of this document and kind of went into how this might shape what's being said. This is something a lot of people struggle with. Definitely pay attention to this. Maria Fedorovna Maratova, a Soviet official in the Women's Department of the Bolshevik Central Committee, explains how women should have their duty to their government, and that women who resist the duty of communist practices and try to preserve old ways will be excluded, ostracized from the government, and potentially society. That first part, that is just using the document to support the thesis. I don't know exactly what her thesis was. So that document's been used, but she hadn't went into how sourcing, how in this case, point of view really affects what's being said. But here she goes. Since she is a Soviet official, she was probably influenced by the government to encourage people or women to follow in communist ways or essentially be punished. Maria is fierce in her argument and has truly been brainwashed by the Communist Party. She has no way of knowing that, but she's thinking about it. How this person's position in society might have impacted what they wrote, what they said. That is all the CAP process is. It is honestly one of the easiest points to get. You gotta be a little creative, you gotta speculate, you gotta look at how context, audience, purpose, point of view may shape what's being done. Okay, and if you feel good about point of view, do point of view every time. If you feel good about context, do context every time. You're not doing all 4 for each of the 3 documents. You're just picking one thing. And believe it or not, some of these kind of lend themselves to one thing. Here's another one. This is document 3. And in this one, they do leave it a little vague. I would say, again, I like it when you put the context, the audience, the purpose, because it makes it very obvious. Something like this might get missed. I don't remember exactly. This one may be point of view as well. Let's look at it. In the North Vietnamese Constitution, it not only claims democracy, but claims women have complete equality to men, which they did not. Okay, so that's using the document. It's very opinionated, but it's using the document. They kind of summarize certain aspects. This is when it gets into CAP. It is a government document, so obviously it would glorify Vietnam as a country flooding with equality. However, a document from a common woman during this time would provide a more accurate description of women's situations during the 20th century Vietnam. It comes from the government, therefore it is biased. We have no way of verifying that. We don't know. but it shows that you're thinking about the process. Here, we've got document 5 being used, so you get this kind of counting towards points of use in the document, but you also get a little bit of outside evidence thrown in. The government propaganda photo, in a similar way, is very pro-government. It shows women in many different fields, the science and military, like science and military, excuse me. The woman in the middle holds the red book, the symbol of the Chinese Cultural Revolution, as if advocating the Chinese government of a means for women's equality. The supposed equality is counteracted by the source because it is from a government group that encourages women to marry and birth late. During the Chinese Cultural Revolution, encourage would not be a suitable word. Better force or coerce would be better. Cultural Revolution is mentioned in the document, but it doesn't go any more into it, okay? So kind of describing the Cultural Revolution a little bit, that works towards outside evidence. She also talks about the little red book here, which I don't remember if we mentioned or not. It's not a huge detail, but it was like this little book of sayings that Mao Zedong had people literally carry around. Those are things, because they are not specifically mentioned or gone into in any depth in the documents themselves, again, you know, it could help. We continue. It even goes a little bit more. Since they, oh yeah, this is where it really gets into what the Cultural Revolution was like. Since those who went against the government were executed, taken care of by the government, any government that makes decisions about a woman's relationship or body/birth without her consent is not providing equality for women. This contradicts all the freedom the Chinese government portrays in the propaganda. So you could even argue that they get into some cap process there as well. Here's another one. You've got document use, you've got some cap. Fidel Castro, this document 6, admitted the discrimination against women in his 1974 speech, describing the inequalities women experienced. He may have been saying these things to gain support of women. We don't know, but we're speculating, so this would go under purpose. Who played a major role in the revolution. Whether or not he planned to act to change the social inequalities, he gained much support of women and furthered his own personal agenda. This shows that communist countries really only concern themselves with feminism and women's rights when it provided personal gain. Again, the cap process is easy. You're just speculating about why it says what it says, why it shows what it shows. So to really kind of hammer this home, now that I've broken down one, we're going to see what old Heimler says. He's going to do his own, and if you want to follow along with him, this is the FRQ that he's going to use. He also references a little DBQ organization worksheet. It says APUSH, but remember APUSH and world history, we use the same type of DBQ, so it's fine. But if you want, you can open this up. It's here. If you want to do it later, that's fine. Well, but let's watch this and see how he breaks down a DBQ. This is one of the DBQs you actually wrote. This is the one that deals with railroads and imperialism and all of that good fun stuff. So let's watch this, kind of see how he goes through the process. And once this is done, we'll call it a day.
Hey there, welcome back to Heimler's History. It's AP exam season, and I've been publishing a metric buttload of videos to help you get ready. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to write a DBQ from beginning to end for AP World History.
Remote students, please watch the video. Use those two references, AP 18 FRQ, the APUSH document, to kind of follow along the timeline. Hopefully build your understanding of DBQs. If you got any questions or need anything, let me know.
From the moment I first see the prompt to the moment I start writing. In other words, I'm going to show you how I would plan for a good DBQ. And a good plan almost always means a good essay, so you cannot afford to hurry.